The laugh hit the royal hall like a weapon. Every guard froze. Every noble turned. For 3 years, Princess Elira had not laughed. Not once. Not since the day her father's warship vanished over the burning moons of Karesh, leaving behind only wreckage, silence, and a child who stopped speaking for 7 straight months. The palace had tried everything. Healers sang ancient comfort songs. Tutors brought glowing animals from distant worlds. The queen ordered the finest dream menders in the empire to sit beside her daughter's bed and pull the grief from her mind. None of it worked. Then a human walked in. Captain Daniel Cross wore a torn olive rescue uniform, a cracked translator on his collar, and the tired face of a man who had survived too many impossible missions. He did not bow the way the court expected. He did not speak with polished diplomatic perfection. He simply dropped to one knee, looked at the little alien princess, and folded a piece of medical paper into the ugliest bird anyone in the palace had ever seen. Elira stared at it. Daniel made the paper bird wobble across his palm. And the princess laughed. Not a weak smile. Not a polite breath. A real, bright, uncontrollable laugh. The sound echoed off the star-glass ceiling. Then the entire palace turned dangerous. 3 royal guards stepped forward. One noble whispered that humans had no right touching the royal bloodline. The queen did not move at all. Her pale hands tightened around the edge of her silver throne. Daniel saw the fear behind their anger. This was not just a child laughing. This was a dead empire waking up. And somewhere high above the hall, hidden behind the golden balcony, a masked figure activated a blade of black light and whispered into a transmitter. The human has reached her. Begin the final silence. The Aurelian Empire did not fear death. It feared joy, because joy made people remember what had been stolen from them. For 3 years, the royal palace of Aurelia Prime had been the quietest place in 12-star systems. No music echoed through its silver halls. No children played in the observatory gardens. No festival lights burned above the capital towers. After King Vila died, the entire empire learned how to mourn in silence. And at the center of that silence was his daughter, Princess Elira. She was only 6 when the king's flagship disappeared near the burning moons of Karesh. The official report said the ship had been ambushed during a peace mission. The Royal Council claimed human raiders were responsible. The news spread through every colony, every orbital city, every soldier's barracks. Humanity became the name Aurelians used when they wanted to describe betrayal. So when Captain Daniel Cross entered the palace, most of the court did not see a rescue officer. They saw a walking insult. A human, standing beneath the same star-glass ceiling where the king's memorial banners still hung. A human, kneeling before the princess. A human, making her laugh. Queen Caroline watched from the throne with her face carved into royal calm. But inside, something old and dangerous stirred. She had spent 3 years protecting her daughter from anything that might break her again. Now the child was running toward the one species the empire had been taught to hate. And worse, Elira was not afraid of him. She trusted him. No one in the court understood why. They did not know that 7 months earlier, a refugee shuttle carrying royal civilians had crashed beyond the neutral border. They did not know the distress signal had landed on a human mining world, ignored by Aurelian command because the region was considered lost. Daniel had answered anyway. He had crossed a radiation storm in a broken rescue craft, cut through the shuttle's hull with a hand torch, and found a blue-skinned child hiding beneath a fallen seat, clutching half of a silver crown. She had not spoken. She had only stared at him with the empty eyes of someone who had already lost too much. Daniel did not ask her for a name. He did not salute her bloodline. He simply wrapped his coat around her, lifted her into his arms, and told her, "You're safe now, kid. I've got you." That was the first human sentence Princess Elira ever believed. Now, inside the palace, that memory returned before anyone could stop it. The nobles saw a threat. The guards saw contamination. The queen saw something worse. Hope. Because if Elira remembered Daniel, then the empire's hatred had a crack in it. And if that crack spread, someone would have to answer for the lie that built the war. High above the hall, the masked watcher listened to the child laughing. Then he sent one quiet command. Seal the exits. Daniel did not bring a weapon into the royal hall. He brought a paper bird. And somehow, that frightened the Empire more. The guards had formed a half-circle around him now, silver armor catching the cold light from the star-glass ceiling. Their hands hovered near their sidearms. The nobles whispered from behind crystal masks. Queen Caroline remained frozen on her throne, watching her daughter stand inches away from a human everyone had been taught to hate. Princess Elira held the crooked paper bird in both hands like it was made of gold. Her laughter faded slowly, but the smile stayed. That was when Daniel understood the real problem. These people did not know how to let a child be happy without asking who had given her permission. Elira looked down at the paper bird, then back up at him. If I laugh, she asked softly, does that mean I forgot him? The entire court went silent. No healer had answered that question. No tutor. No priest of the old stars. They had dressed grief in ceremony and called silence noble. But not one of them had told a 6-year-old girl what to do with the love still trapped inside her chest. Daniel's expression changed. Not into pity. Pity was what the court gave her. Daniel gave her truth. He leaned closer and said, "No, kid. It means he gave you something strong enough to survive him." The queen's face cracked. Just for a second. But everyone saw it. Her fingers rose to her mouth, and the court around her seemed to shrink under the weight of that single human sentence. Aurelians preserved grief like stone. They built statues, sealed rooms, and banned songs that carried too much memory. They believed pain proved loyalty. The longer you suffered, the more love you had shown. Humans were different. Humans buried their dead, then told stories about them over dinner. They cried beside hospital beds, then laughed at the one joke the dying person would have wanted repeated. They carried loss like a scar, not a cage. That was humanity's hidden advantage. Not stronger bones. Not faster ships. Not better guns. It was the terrifying ability to be broken and still reach for joy. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out another strip of medical paper. The guards tightened. He ignored them. Elira watched closely as his hands moved. Fold. Press. Turn. Fold again. Your father was better at this than me, Daniel said. The room changed. Queen Caroline stood. What did you say? Daniel did not look away from the child. He made them tighter at the nose. Said mine flew like wounded laundry. A gasp moved through the nobles. Elira's smile vanished, replaced by something deeper. Recognition. Confusion. Hope so fragile it almost hurt to look at. My father knew you. Daniel's fingers paused. There it was. The loop no one in the palace had dared to open. He held up the second bird. This one was cleaner, sharper. Elira touched its wings with trembling fingers. Before the war got loud, Daniel said, your father came to a human border station under a false name. He wanted to understand us before signing peace. No guards. No crown. Just a tired man asking why humans laughed so much when the galaxy kept trying to kill them. For the first time, the court did not interrupt. Even the guards listened. Daniel smiled faintly. I told him because sometimes laughing is the only way to tell the universe it didn't win. Elira looked at the bird in her hands. Then she whispered, did he laugh? Daniel nodded. Loudly. Terrible laugh. Like a broken engine. A tiny sound escaped the princess. Half sob. Half laugh. Queen Caroline stepped down from the throne, one slow step at a time, as if the floor beneath her had become uncertain. For 3 years, she had believed her husband died hating humanity. Now a human stood before her daughter, carrying memories the royal archive had never recorded. And that meant someone had stolen more than a king. They had stolen the truth. Suddenly, every light in the hall flickered. The star-glass ceiling dimmed from gold to blood-red emergency glow. The palace doors sealed with a thunderous metallic lock. Nobles screamed as black security shutters dropped over the windows. Daniel rose instantly and pulled Elira behind him. The guards turned outward, confused. Then every screen in the royal hall came alive. A distorted recording appeared. King Vila's face filled the wall. Older. Exhausted. Alive inside the final moments of his missing ship. Queen Caroline stopped breathing. Elira stepped from behind Daniel, eyes wide. The king's voice cracked through the speakers. If this reaches Aurelia, do not blame the humans. The court erupted. The recording glitched. Daniel looked up, his blood turning cold. Because in the reflection of the nearest screen, he saw someone standing on the upper balcony. A masked figure in black armor, watching the princess. The same figure raised one hand. A hidden blade of dark light unfolded without a sound. Daniel grabbed Elira and shouted the one word every human rescue officer learned before fear, before protocol, before pain. Move! And the assassin dropped from the balcony. The assassin fell without a sound. No warning. No mercy. Daniel moved before the royal guards even understood what they were seeing. 1 second, Princess Elira stood beneath the red emergency lights, staring at her father's face on the palace screens. The next, Daniel had her in his arms and was rolling across the marble floor as a blade of black light carved through the space where her head had been. The hall exploded into panic. Nobles scattered behind crystal pillars. Guards shouted over one another, their helmets flickering with corrupted orders. Some aimed at the assassin. Others aimed at Daniel. That was the genius of the trap. The palace security system had been poisoned from the inside. Every Aurelian guard saw a different threat marker. Half their visors painted the assassin as royal security. The other half labeled Daniel Cross as an armed human invader. And above them all, King Vila's final recording kept playing. If this reaches Aurelia, do not blame the humans. The image glitched, then stabilized. Vila's face was pale, surrounded by sparks and warning lights. His ship was dying around him, but his voice stayed steady. The Drakari attacked under human colors. They wanted us divided. They wanted my daughter to grow up hating the only species stubborn enough to cross enemy fire for a stranger. Queen Caroline staggered as if struck. For 3 years, her grief had been shaped into a weapon. Her silence had been used to feed a war. Her daughter's pain had been turned into proof of a lie. Then the assassin came for Elira again. Daniel pushed the child behind a fallen ceremonial banner and grabbed the only thing within reach, a broken guard's shock staff skidding across the floor. He had no armor, no royal training, no elegant alien combat form, just human instinct. The assassin lunged low, fast enough to blur. Daniel blocked, the impact driving him backward across the marble. Pain flashed through his arms. The staff sparked in his grip. He gritted his teeth and shoved back. The court watched in disbelief. A human rescue officer was holding off a Drakari shadow killer inside the heart of the Aurelian Empire. Not because he had been ordered to, because a child was behind him. The assassin twisted, kicked Daniel hard into a column, and turned toward Elira. The princess froze, clutching the paper bird in her shaking hands. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Queen Caroline stepped between them. The hall went still. The queen's silver-white gown dragged through shattered glass. Her crown had tilted. Her eyes burned with the kind of fury that grief becomes when it finally finds the right target. "You used my husband's death," she said. The assassin's masked head turned toward her. "You used my daughter's silence." Behind the mask, a cold voice answered, "Your empire was easier to control when it had someone to hate." That sentence did what no speech, no treaty, no council hearing ever could. It broke the spell. Every Aurelian in the hall heard it. The Drakari had not only killed a king. They had taught an empire to fear the wrong enemy. Daniel forced himself up, one hand pressed against his ribs. His translator sparked against his collar. His rescue uniform was torn, but the emergency beacon on his chest still blinked faintly. He looked at the sealed windows, the dead communications grid, the corrupted guard helmets. Then he smiled. "Small, dangerous, human. You forgot something," Daniel said. The assassin tilted his head. Daniel slammed his fist against the beacon. A pulse of blue-white light burst from his uniform and shot through the marble floor, down into the palace foundation. The Aurelian generals laughed bitterly. "Impossible," One of them snapped. The palace is sealed. Nothing gets through a Drakari dead zone. Daniel did not look at him. Yeah, he said. That's what collapsed mines say too. The beacon fired again. This was not military tech built for perfect conditions. It was human rescue tech. Built for asteroid caves, sunken ships, frozen moons, disaster zones where power failed, map slide, and people still needed to be found. It did not ask permission from the dead zone. It punched through it. Above the palace, the clouds split. One signal became 10. 10 became hundreds. Human rescue ships dropped from orbit like falling stars, their floodlights cutting across the capital. Not warships. Not invasion carriers. Rescue vessels. Medical frigates. Evacuation craft. Machines built for saving life in places where every other species had already given up. The Aurelian defense grid locked onto them. Then Queen Sairline raised her hand. Stand down. No one obeyed at first. She turned slowly, her voice shaking the entire hall. I said stand down. One by one, the cannons powered off. The assassin realized too late what had changed. The queen was no longer protecting a lie. Daniel charged. The assassin met him halfway, black blade flashing. Daniel ducked, drove the shock staff into the killer's armor, and forced him back toward the center screen where King Vila's final message still burned across the wall. The assassin slashed Daniel's shoulder. Daniel barely flinched. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest. But they had a gift that terrified everyone who studied them long enough. Once a human decided someone was worth saving, pain became background noise. Daniel drove forward again. The queen moved with him. Aurelian guards finally snapped out of the corrupted commands and surrounded the assassin from every side. The Drakari tried to vanish into shadow, but human rescue lights blasted through the windows, washing the hall in white. No darkness left. No lie left. No silence left. The assassin dropped his blade. Elira ran from behind the banner and grabbed Daniel's torn sleeve. He looked down at her, breathing hard. You okay, kid? Her eyes filled with tears. Then she nodded. Across the hall, Queen Sairline faced the open palace doors, the human ships landing beyond them. For 3 years, she had locked the world out to protect her daughter from pain. Now she understood the truth. Walls had not saved Elira. A human had. The queen lifted her chin and gave the order that would change 12 systems forever. Open the gates. She looked at Daniel. Let the humans in. By dawn, the whole empire had heard the truth. Not from a council statement. Not from a royal decree. From a dead king's own voice. Across 12 systems, every public screen showed King Vila's final transmission. The broken bridge. The failing lights. The calm in his eyes as he told his people what had really happened near the moons of Karesh. The humans did not betray us. The Drakari did. And in the silence after that recording ended, the Aurelian Empire felt something it had not felt in 3 years. Shame. In the capital streets, citizens stood beneath the morning sky, watching human rescue ships descend through the palace clouds. No cannons fired. No defense alarms screamed. No soldiers ordered them away. The gates were open. And that frightened the old nobles more than any invasion ever could. Because war was simple. War gave them enemies, banners, speeches, and blame. But truth demanded something harder. It demanded they look a human in the face and admit the monster in their stories had come to save their princess. Inside the Royal Medical Wing, Captain Daniel Cross opened his eyes to the sound of paper folding. Not alarms. Not battle commands. Paper. He turned his head slowly and saw Princess Elira sitting beside his bed, her little feet tucked beneath her cream dress, her curls falling over one eye as she tried very seriously to fold a paper bird. It was terrible. One wing was too long. The nose was crushed. The tail looked like it had lost an argument with gravity. Daniel stared at it for a moment. Then he whispered, "That might be the ugliest bird in 2 galaxies." Elira's face lifted. For one breath, the old fear returned. The fear that laughing was betrayal. The fear that happiness meant forgetting. Then Daniel smiled. And the princess laughed. Soft at first. Then brighter. The sound moved through the medical wing like sunlight through dust. A nurse stopped in the doorway. A guard lowered his eyes. Somewhere outside, an entire palace seemed to hold its breath, as if it was listening to a miracle it had no right to interrupt. Queen Caroline entered without ceremony. No throne robes. No battle crown. No wall of advisors behind her. Just a mother. She stood at the foot of Daniel's bed and looked at the human who had carried her daughter through fire, lies, and the kind of hatred empires build monuments around. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she bowed. Not the shallow nod of diplomacy. A full royal bow. The guards behind her froze. The nurses stared. Elira's eyes widened. Daniel tried to sit up. Your Majesty, you don't have to. Yes, Caroline said quietly. I do. Her voice did not shake, but it carried the weight of 3 lost years. My husband trusted humanity before I did. My daughter remembered humanity before I was brave enough to. And you? She looked at his torn uniform, the bruises beneath his collar. The emergency beacon still burned black from overuse. You protected the last piece of my heart when my own palace failed her. Daniel glanced at Elira. The child was watching him like he had an answer to every pain in the universe. He did not. He was just human. Tired. Hurt. Stubborn. And still there. That's what we do, he said. We go back for people. Outside the windows, the first human rescue crews crossed into the palace courtyard. They did not march like conquerors. They moved like workers after a storm, carrying medical packs, repair tools, water crates, emergency blankets. Aurelian citizens watched them carefully at first. Then one child stepped forward. A human medic knelt and offered him a warm ration pack. That was all it took. The fear cracked again. By midday, Aurelians and humans were clearing wreckage together. By evening, the first joint investigation named the Drakari agents who had lived inside the royal security network for years. By nightfall, the Queen ordered the old war banners removed from the palace hall. And in their place, she hung one thing. A paper bird. Not because it was beautiful. Because it had done what fleets had failed to do. It had crossed the distance between grief and hope. 3 days later, Queen Caroline stood before the Empire with Elira at her side and Daniel behind them, still wearing his battered rescue uniform because no one could convince him to accept royal armor. The Queen spoke to every world under Aurelian light. We were told humanity was our enemy, she said. But our enemy needed us silent. Humanity made my daughter laugh. Humanity carried the truth through fire. Humanity stood between our future and the blade meant to end it. She reached down. Elira placed her tiny hand in her mother's. Then the Queen said the words that changed history. From this day forward, the Aurelian Empire stands with Earth. Across the palace, soldiers lowered their old hatred. Across human space, rescue officers raised quiet glasses to a captain who had turned a paper bird into an alliance. But the most powerful moment came after the speeches. Elira walked alone to her father's memorial statue. She placed her crooked paper bird at its feet and looked up at the stone face of the king she still missed. I laughed today, she whispered. Then, after a moment, she smiled. I think you would have liked him. Behind her, Daniel stood beside the Queen. No one spoke. They did not need to. For the first time in 3 years, the palace did not feel like a tomb. It felt alive. And when Elira ran back and threw herself into Daniel's arms, her laughter rose through the star-glass ceiling, out over the capital, and into the ships waiting above. The galaxy heard it. A child laughing in the arms of a human. A sound small enough to come from one broken heart. And strong enough to end a war. But far beyond the border, in the black halls of the Drakari Dominion, that same laugh played through a stolen transmission. Their war council listened in silence. Then their commander whispered, now they have something to protect. And every Drakari in the room understood. That was when humans became dangerous.